can get started then. So as I said, hi everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today on International Women's Day. So my name is Holly Abbott and I'm a Senior Campaign Manager at Babel PR. And I'm joined by a panel of inspirational women in tech. And over the next hour or so, we're going to be discussing how to empower the next generation of women into this sector. So let's just kick off with introductions. So first we have Dr. Ellison Anne, who is the founder and CEO of Enveil, a privacy enhancing technology company. Then we have Zoe Grist, the head of Security Operations Center at Orange Cyberdefense, which is the expert cybersecurity arm of the Orange Group. Then we have Pam Napier, the Senior Manager of Cloud in the UK and Ireland at Veeam, a leader in data protection, backup and recovery solutions. And last but not least, Eugina Jordan, CMO at the Telecom Infra Project, which is a community working together to accelerate the deployment of open and disaggregated network solutions. So firstly, I just wanted to start off with a bit of a view of the state of the technology industry as it stands today. So Pam, perhaps we can start off with you first. In your experience, has the industry changed much since you started in terms of female representation and support for women?
Hugely. So it's 20 years this year since I joined the tech industry. So previous to that, it was sort of 10 years working in food industry. So it was a huge change. I can still remember the first day when I started at a company. I walked through the door and there was only me that looked like me. I think starting, with quite a lot of strong male characters was quite daunting at first. And quite quickly, in fact, a few weeks after I started at that job, I actually fell pregnant. So I think I put a lot of extra pressure on myself. One, that I wanted to fit in. Two, I wanted to be as good as everybody else in the team. And three, I didn't want to show, as I saw it at the time, any weakness, because, I was pregnant. So I probably worked harder. I used to spend a lot of time going home in the evening, looking at the technology, doing a lot of self-learning, presenting on a daily basis back to my technical colleagues, so that I could be, in my head, as good as, if not better than them. And I think what I learned quite quickly is that I wasn't really any different. I had a lot of people around me who were there to support me and they wanted me to succeed. And I think deep down, I think they saw me probably as a bit of a project at the time, of, how they could bring me into the team, how they could nurture some of the skills that I had as a woman, and maybe to soften the environment a little bit as well. So it was really complementary. And I think one of the positives that I can take away from it, there was a negative. I'll say the negative first. One of the negatives was because I was trying so hard, I actually worked straight up to the day that my waters broke. And I didn't learn from it, because the second pregnancy that I had, I did exactly the same thing again. And the second time I actually gave birth prematurely. And I think I put so much pressure on myself to succeed. And the positive from that is I made some mistakes. I learned a lot from it. I think I've passed a lot of that knowledge on to now some of my colleagues that I work with now. But my male colleagues were the ones that were telling me to slow down. They were the ones telling me to take the time. And I think I put more pressure on myself. So to answer your question at the beginning, yes, I think it has changed a lot. And I think there are a lot of inspirational men out there who are really supportive. And I think we've got to remember that they've got wives, partners, sons, daughters, they've got the same experiences that we've got. And I think it's really important to be honest, to be open, to share some of, if you're having a bad day or you weren't feeling particularly great, I think I think there is understanding as a woman would be in that scenario. But I think the positive is now that we're starting to see a lot more women in the industry. And I think through some of the experiences that we've gone through over the years, we can pass on those experiences and bring more women into the industry and support them.
Yeah, that's great. Eugina, I could see you nodding along there and agreeing with Pam. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I really can relate to this story because I had to work super hard and I put a lot of pressure on myself. And just like you, I worked till almost the day of my delivery 18 years ago. And then I had a very complicated C-section. 2 days later, I was on the computer working. And they were cheering me on. Oh, you're so valuable. So thank you so much. So 18 years later, when I had females on my team, I didn't want them to go through the same experience. So like Pamela, what you're saying, we worked so hard, we put all the pressure on ourselves. So now we can bring and help women like us not to put the same pressure on themselves, not to burn out, not to work from their delivery bed, because no one needs to do it.
And I don't think anybody expects it either.
So as women, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves because we think that's the only way to succeed. And what I almost cried, when you were describing that experience, because no one deserves that. And ladies out there that listening, you don't need to be like us. There is, like Pamela said, there are men and women that they're going to make it better for you.
Yeah, definitely. And Ellison Anne, does that kind of align with your overview of the technology industry and how it's changed since you started in it?
Yeah, I think I had a slightly different experience in that I was in predominantly supportive environments all through my career, which was great. And I've never worked for a woman, never had a woman mentor, but I've had fantastic people that I've worked for and fantastic mentors. So just a shout out to all the men out there that do a great job in supporting the women, because that's certainly been my story. And as a counterpoint, I have a mom of 5, and I also worked right up until I delivered, but not because I felt some kind of pressure to do more because I was female, but because I really loved what I was doing. Now, that said, I think burnout is an issue. Doesn't matter if you're male or female or what you're doing, that you have to be mindful of that. But just to kind of offer a different perspective from a female in tech.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And Zoe, I know you had a bit of a different way into the tech sector, starting in the police force first. So I'd be quite interested to get your perspective on how you think the technology sector compares to the police when it comes to gender diversity, support for women entering the industry, for example. Obviously, both as quite male-dominated industries most of the time.
Yeah, no, exactly that. So I'd say working in the police force, definitely male-dominated environment. If you're a female, it's always highlighted everywhere. But I'd say that the tech industry does it a little bit differently. It is more showcasing women in the industry, whereas police, it's just kind of, it's highlighted, but I wouldn't say that they really have got it right. I'd say working for Orange, definitely, starting 5 years ago, I have just seen more and more women come into the organisation and the wider industry around me as well, interacting with more women on a daily basis in all kinds of roles. So obviously you've got things like sales, marketing, project management, but also more women coming into the technical operational roles, which is kind of my area, which is just brilliant. So I'd say the key difference is the effort I see the tech industry actually putting into trying to get more women in the roles, celebrating women in tech as well, and driving that movement forward. Whereas the police, it's still quite a little bit old-fashioned, still a little bit stuck in their ways. They do their bit, but definitely the tech industry is on the rise with that movement.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So based on this, Eugina, I know that you have experience of working with and championing senior and C-suite women across a whole range of industries. So how do you think that the technology sector compares to other industries?
So unfortunately, the data I have is showing that we need to do more. If we look at middle career level women in tech and telecom, we have 35%. So the pipeline is there, though it's not 50%, but the pipeline is there. When we look at the C-suite in telecom, it's only 12%. So what happens? Why we don't see the 35% in the C-level in telecom? And I think, Ellison, you hit it on, we need sponsors. So I was lucky enough to have a male sponsor who was the CEO 20 years ago at my first startup where I started as a receptionist. So there is the executive table is mostly male dominated. So you need to have a champion in that room that will say your name, that will give you the interesting project, that will propel you to the next level. So I believe it's not the lack of pipeline. It's not the lack of desire, like Pamela was saying, right? We are capable. We have what it takes. We're going to work hard. It's the lack of sponsorship. So, and every time I talk on panels or I write in the LinkedIn post, I encourage everyone to sponsor at least one person a day, because sponsorship is not big. Sponsorship is saying a person's name in the room when they're not there.
Yeah, that's really valuable. Thanks, Eugina. So just before we move on to some of the ways, apart from kind of mentoring and sponsorship, like you mentioned, Eugina, that we could overcome the challenges women are facing in tech and kind of make that balance more even, I'd be quite keen to learn a bit more about any specific challenges women are facing in the sector. So Ellison Anne, perhaps starting with you this time, are there any particular challenges that you think you've faced in your career, and how did you overcome them, if so?
So as I mentioned before, I think I've been very blessed in order to be places where that was cultivated and you were really looked at for your merit and not based on your gender. That I understand is not normal in the industry. And some of that was just me kind of maneuvering to those places and finding those people. And thankfully I did, they existed. So that's awesome, but they could have not been there. Just like we were talking about a little bit before, I didn't really see any women kind of issues until I went out and started Enveil. So founder, CEO of company, that's when I encountered a little bit more of the gender types of issues. I actually had somebody say to me as I was coming out, well, what does it feel like to be the only woman in the room ever? And I said, honestly, I didn't realize that I was, which is not a popular thing to say in a women in tech setting, but that's just a testament to showing up, delivering the substance, and being recognized for what you were doing, and not kind of looking around the table and across your shoulder and trying to compare yourself to everybody else. You just show up and do the work and be awesome, and then find great mentors and great sponsors, and then you can kind of move up from there. And the same holds true here on the outside, I will say, CEO and founder, just show up and let your substance speak for itself. And it really quiets all of that noise, I think. And yes, I've showed up in a room and people say, well, you're a girl. Well, yeah, I'm a girl, clearly. But when I start talking about what I came to talk about, that all fades away. So I think just persevering past the noise, which is really what it is, and showing up with substance is what I've found to be very effective across my career.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And Pam, what about you? I know you've worked in the tech sector for, I think, over 20 years now. Are there any specific hurdles you've faced over this time, perhaps when you're first getting started, or maybe earlier in your career?
I think, again, there's a bit of a constant theme, but I think the only hurdles were the ones that I put in place for myself. And I think it's about being brave. I think it's about making mistakes. I think it's about learning from those mistakes. I think it's about being outspoken. I can remember times in the past where, I've sat there, I clearly disagreed or thought that there was a different way that things could be done. And, not said it. And I think over time with experience, I've learned to speak up. I've learned that, you know, might not always be right, might not always be a popular opinion. But sometimes, you know, it can be the right answer. So I think the one thing, yeah, that I would pass on is that, you know, I've always said this to my team, is no idea is a bad idea. And I think you've got to throw it out there. You've got to discuss it. You've got to explore it. But the hurdles, I think, were my hurdles. And I'm not going to say that there's not been decisions that have been taken that could be viewed as hurdles. I think sometimes, you know, we just don't want to hear no, you know, and we've got to learn to deal with that, and we've got to find different ways of working. And I think over the time of just looking at different people's styles, and this is men and women, looking at people's styles, looking at logic, maybe to some decisions sometimes, and actually asking why, I think can help you to understand what those hurdles can be sometimes and break down those barriers. So I think that's what, you know, what my experience has been.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. It's quite interesting that there seems to be kind of a running theme of maybe there's opportunity in the tech sector, but it's unfortunately women ourselves that maybe don't have the confidence to pursue those opportunities. So with that in mind, I'm quite interested to hear from the audience as well, to see your perspective on whether you think the industry is doing enough to empower women to get into technology. So I'm just going to launch a short poll, which hopefully you can see now. Do you think the industry is doing enough to empower women in technology? A yes or no? I'll just share those results. So quite clearly, a lot of people on the webinar today, unfortunately, don't think the industry is doing enough to empower women at the moment. Obviously, a few that are unsure there as well, which maybe means that we need to just be kind of publishing more about what we're doing to empower women, and a few that have said yes as well. So glad to see that that there are some people that have had a really positive experience there. So with these results in mind, there still obviously is more to be done to encourage women to join the sector. So Zoe, let's perhaps go to you. What do you think we can do to encourage women to join the technology sector?
I think it's all about the visibility piece, like you mentioned there. Maybe we're not shouting as much as we should be about the things we're doing. You know, International Women's Day is great. It's a great launching pad, but it's one day. We need to be looking at the rest of the year and every other day as well. I think something I recently recognized is showcasing when I'm recruiting what my team currently looks like, who's in my team, because people will resonate with faces, with genders, with diversity, with, you know, age differences. So that's something that I'm really keen to get across when I'm interviewing somebody about a position, you know, that my team is so diverse. Got some women in my teams, you know, older gentlemen, younger guys, and it is really diverse. So I think it's really about that visibility and the culture that we're showing as an organization as well, but also looking at targeting the schools. I mean, we talk about, you know, that is where the funnel is coming from, you know, men, women, boys, girls in primary school, secondary school, higher education. And I still think we have this concept of boy girl jobs. I think, you know, as much as we try and break those that down, we still have that concept in our schools very much so. And I think it's really about highlighting maybe just not the technology itself and the technical abilities of the role, but also what you do on a day-to-day basis. My team, very operational. Yes, they are technical, but they're dealing with customers. So there's a lot of customer facing roles, communication, team building. So there's so many other things that is just not focused on tech that we could be talking about as well. I mean, in my position, I get lots of opportunity to travel and I really thrive on that. So it's talking about all the other things that we can do in the tech industry. It's not just focused on, you know, your technical capabilities or your interest particularly in that path. So yeah, I think definitely visibility, cultural awareness, and then targeting the schools, definitely.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Ellison Anne, do you have anything to add on that based on your own experiences?
I think visibility is huge, and we've talked about that a little bit, but just being out there and people seeing that you're doing a fantastic job, period. So you're leading with a substance, and oh, by the way, you happen to be female. I think leading with the substance is the key and being visible while doing that. So my goal is not to necessarily trumpet women in tech, but to normalize it, that you can be a technical female founder and CEO, and that's not very interesting or exciting in and of itself, but it's what you're doing and you're showing up and delivering every day that makes the difference. And then, oh, by the way, you're female. I think that's what the message I try to deliver, what I try to lead with, and just set the example.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're going to get back onto that visibility piece in a second, but just before we do, Pam, I know that you have some personal experience with mentoring, so I'd be quite keen to know what role you believe things like mentoring are going to play in the future of getting more women into the technology space as well.
Yeah, I think for me it's been not only do I mentor, but I am I'm a mentee for somebody else, and I found that really valuable throughout my whole career. And I think back to the point, I mean, all the mentors that I've had have been male mentors, and they've been fantastic by sort of framing some of my experiences, some of my thought process, and actually helping me to become a really good mentor within Veeam. So I actually mentor a young lady who's actually in the US, and my journey started it's probably about 18 months ago now, and we set out with a specific goal in mind, that we wanted to move her from an inside role to a field role. So we put a series of plans in place. We talked about some of the challenges and some of the hurdles that, you know, we discussed earlier, and how she could overcome them. I think it was asking the whys, asking the questions, preparing for, for meetings and discussions with her manager about how she wanted to progress. And I think what I probably learned a lot more from mentoring somebody else, because it got me thinking about some of those questions as well, because I was very sort of forthright with giving her advice. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I actually gave her was actually ask for what you want. And you've got to be very vocal about what you want to achieve. And what your goals are, not just from a business perspective, but also from a personal perspective as well, because I think they're real drivers. And 12 months in, she got the promotion, and I think for me, obviously for her, she got the promotion, she was really happy, but for me that was a huge personal achievement, and I feel really proud that I'm helping somebody on their journey. And and I think I've said this quite a few times to a lot of people, but if she can pass that on to somebody else and we carry on that journey, I think we're going to have a lot of really successful women.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you. So we've spoken a lot about kind of the broad themes that need to happen to encourage more women into the sector, but are any of your businesses doing anything specific or kind of tangible to encourage women into these roles? Are there any kind of schemes in place or anything like that? Eugina, I don't know if you want to take that one.
Happy to. We Telecom Infra Project, we have a diversity committee, and it's prominent industry companies, Dell, Rakuten Symphony, Capgemini, Mavenir, Intel, Meta, because our goal is twofold. Bring more women into telecom. There are programs where we do webinars for colleges. We help recruiters how to recruit talent in telecom, but also we are committed as an organization to make all this amazing female talent visible. As an organization, we are committed to gender diversity and gender parity on our panels, anything we do, because if you see them, you can be them. And also, if you visit TIP's social media channels this month, all month, we're actually showcasing women of TIP community. And you ladies will be very happy to know that we have a whole month, at least 3 posts going a day. So you're going to see at least 90 amazing women being celebrated by the community.
That sounds great, Eugina. And links into our next poll as well, which is nice. So we want to know about obviously what can be done to eradicate these hurdles that women are facing and kind of encourage more people to get into the sector. So I'm just going to start another poll now about whether, there we go, whether there's enough female representation in the technology trade media itself. So I'll just let the audience answer that poll quickly now. This one looks like quite a strong no. Let me just share those results. We haven't got any yeses this time. So 80% of the people watching believe that there isn't enough representation in the trade media of women in these roles. So with that in mind, again, Eugina, obviously you're on here from a marketing perspective, which is different from our other panelists. So I'd be keen to know what role you think comms and marketing needs to play in promoting female representation in technology. I know we've spoken a lot about visibility, but are there any other kind of benefits to this? What else do you think we can be doing in this space?
So we all need to take a stand. I can tell a story from MWC where a big company was telling me that the female speakers didn't get accepted to speak. And I said, did you take a stand and did you pull all your male speakers off the panels? Did you say that if you're not gonna put my female speakers on, we're not gonna speak at all? Of course they didn't. So to bring more women, men need to give up their positions on panels or in the trade media. What was done amazingly, Dell, they're part of the committee, what they did amazingly at MWC, senior men, they give up their places so middle level women can be interviewed and can be visible. So it takes one person, one simple interview to make sure that women are visible. I know that many publications, RCA Wireless, Telecom TV, Pierce Wireless, they are committed to gender diversity. They hire diverse talent. And also they are looking always for female speakers. So if a quote is going to be from a man, that man should say, how about this female in my organization? So I believe strongly that that's the only way we can do it. Give up your slot. I personally, that's why I always moderate, because I want other people, female speakers, to be on my panels. I don't need to be visible. I want them to be visible.
Thanks, Eugina. Ellison Anne, do you have anything to add to that? I don't know what your perspective is of how we can kind of promote more female representation in the media.
So I think sometimes toward normalization, it's just the little things. I completely agree about visibility, speaking slots, things like that. But I'll give you an example. So there's a VC firm that's very well known, you know, in the kind of VC-backed product world called Andreessen Horowitz or A16Z. They're not an investor in ours, just disclaimer from that perspective. But Ben Horowitz, one of the founders, will often write about CEOs, and he references them as her and she. So just little things like that in terms of referencing a CEO as a female goes a long way in normalizing in the VC-backed startup tech industry that, yeah, women can absolutely be CEOs and founders, and that is not an unusual situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then Pam, from your perspective, are you personally seeing enough women in the media that are talking specifically about kind of technical issues or topics, for example, like you would, rather than just being a woman in technology and giving their perspective on that. I think often we see women just talking about being women. So I'd be quite interested to know whether you think that's changing or if anything else needs to be done to improve that.
I think there's definitely an improvement that's needed. I think I can speak from a Veeam perspective. I think having me talking specifically around cloud and data protection, I think has been a really positive move for the company. I think it's definitely got us potentially a different audience. And I think, I can't remember who said it, but I think people seeing people who look like them sometimes are more inclined to read the story or listen to the interview. And it does throw a different perspective and a different voice. So I think we've still got a way to go. Personally, I would like to see a lot more of my fellow colleagues in the tech industry sort of speaking around the same topics, or similar topics, should I say. But yeah, we've got a way to go, Holly.
Yeah, definitely. And Zoe, just the final point on this, I'd be keen to get your perspective on it as well. Is it something that you perhaps looked at before you joined the sector, kind of reading about women in the industry, or do you think that it's something that we still need to focus on more?
No, personally, I didn't. I had obviously done criminology at university, so I was more looking for the position rather than the industry, if that makes sense. So I started off as a service delivery manager, and it kind of combined my history of customer service, customer facing roles with my interest in the cyber world. So I didn't tend really to look at that, and even now I don't think that would be a massive thing for me, but mainly because of the person I guess I am. I'm quite a driven person regardless, so if I do see challenges, I'll just look for a way to overcome those. And so yeah, no, not necessarily, and again, it wouldn't necessarily put me off, but there are people that it would put off, and I think exactly that we need to do more. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So I've just spotted that we've got a question in the Q&A from one of our attendees. So I'll just read that out and then we can answer that one as well. So they say, as a male in the industry, what are the things that we can do to support our female colleagues in the sector? How do you strike a balance between offering support while not trying to treat female colleagues differently? So Eugina, I don't know if you want to kick that one off.
So I love that question, because this question shows that the person is very aware. So wherever you are, thank you for that question. I would just be aware. So I would give two pieces of advice. Number one, in meetings, if there is a couple of women in the room, and normally we're quieter, we wouldn't express our opinions. So allow them to speak, ask for their opinion. And again, it's not treating them differently, because all other participants in the meeting probably already spoke up. And especially in virtual environments, it's hard for women to speak. So ask them, Jennifer, what do you think about this question? And then secondly, is keep mentioning their name, women's name in the room. If they're doing a great job, mention their name, because again, as women, we don't talk about our accomplishments. So be a cheerleader. And again, thank you so much for that question.
Great, thanks, Eugina. Pam, do you have anything to add to that one?
I totally agree. I think the only bit that I differ on is I'm quite outspoken. So I think it's actually being aware of other people, in the room. I totally agree with you, Gina. I think we do need to give everybody a voice and give everybody their time to speak, because the quietest person in the room sometimes can have the best ideas. So I think that's one. I totally agree with the cheerleading. I think I think what resonated more is when Eugina said we're not very good at speaking up about ourselves. I totally relate to that. I think, you know, from the people that I know, I'm not saying that every woman's the same, but I think we're very, very poor at giving ourselves a pat on the back, and we're very poor at telling people what we've done. I think we just do it and we just get on with it, and we don't actually tell people that we've done it and what we've done and how great we were at doing that. And I think sometimes it's really good just to get that recognition. Yeah, and I think, you know, watching a lot of women over the years, we don't necessarily go out there looking for praise. But when we've done a great job, it's really nice for somebody to actually say it. So yeah, I think that's been my experience. So I think to answer the question, you know, to whoever answered it, I think it's actually just shouting out, you know, if you see something good or you see a great job, I think letting the person know that, because they might not be the most confident person in the room, and you know that could really propel them to start, you know, to start speaking up in the future, to bring in their ideas to the table, and just giving them confidence to do that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Definitely. Thanks, Pam. And Zoe, you mentioned that you have quite a diverse team as well in terms of men and women in different ages. Is there anything that kind of you encourage people on your team to do, and any male people on your team to do to kind of support their female colleagues?
So I've got 2 female engineers in a team in Mauritius, actually. And actually in the UK, I don't have any females, but in our other departments, some of our operational departments, we do. I would say, again, it's more about we don't want to go the other way. We don't want to then be speaking about women too much and doing everything for the women and forgetting about everyone else, because let's face it, there are so many different aspects to diversity and inclusion and equality. So I think it's just across the board, we need to be highlighting everyone's successes, everyone's praises, picking people up, really focusing on that collaboration, that teamwork, and that culture, and driving that culture right from the ground all the way up, because that's how culture is made. It's not driven top down, it is from the teams at the bottom. So I wouldn't say I do anything particularly different for women, for females, etc. I try and have a complete across the board policy that if anyone's doing something great, we highlight it, we champion it. I'm constantly giving feedback to the team, and it's just being aware of the people around you. Like you said, if someone is particularly quiet, it's maybe assessing their personality traits and characteristics, and as a manager, adapting to potentially how I then talk to them, or how I coach them or mentor them and enable them. So it's just being aware of the room, aware of the people around you, and aware of how other people need to develop in other ways.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. So just looking at the Q&A again, we've got another interesting question here that says, a lot of research has shown that a lack of role models is one of the main barriers that stops women from entering the technology industry. Did you specifically have any role models that you looked up to when venturing into the world of tech? So Ellison Anne, perhaps let's start with you, as I know you mentioned that you were surrounded by a lot of men in various rooms when you were getting started. Is there anyone that you particularly looked up to when starting your career in the tech industry?
No females, like I had said before. Unfortunately, there are not many of us, although that is growing, right, which is awesome. But really, you know, this is going to sound a little maybe cliche, but it's true, is my dad, who was a repeat entrepreneur. And so from a very young age, as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to run and start my own companies. So I get to live my dream every day, and he modeled that for me. So that was a fantastic role model that I was born with, I will say. But there is no female role model looking around from a CEO founder perspective, especially in technology, that I said, wow, they're doing an awesome job. I want to be like them. Just didn't exist.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. Thanks, thanks, Ellison Anne. So another question here relates to the gender pay gap, which obviously is still one of the biggest problems that we're facing across any industry, not just technology. How do you think that we can help to address this going forwards? Pam, perhaps we could get your perspective on that one.
I think it's what I talked about and the last question, I think we need to be very forthright and ask. And I think we need to set out plans on, if we want to achieve a particular role, if we want to achieve a particular pay bracket, or, I think we've got to set those goals, and we need to be very vocal. I'm a true believer that, yes, the gender pay gap does exist, but I think the power is in our hands, to push those boundaries, to put the work in, to demand the same pay for the same job. So I think it's going out there, it's asking for it, and setting the expectation, and then, setting some clear goals to get to where you want to get to. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. And Ellison Anne, what about you? Do you have any thoughts on how we can kind of tackle the gender pay gap?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, certainly from an employer perspective, our job is to look beyond the loudest voices and down into the substance and the merit, which goes back to what we've talked about before. And that's true, male, female, it doesn't really matter. You've got people that are more outspoken, that are better at advocating and negotiating on their own behalf, and people that just aren't, regardless of gender. So getting beyond that and looking beyond it to what they actually did and where they should be, I think, is the way to ultimately fix the issue.
Definitely, thank you. So finally, just quite a nice one to end on here. Someone has said that in honor of International Women's Day, it's really important to celebrate your achievements. What would you say has been your biggest career achievement to date, and what did it teach you about yourself? So Zoe, perhaps we can start with you on that one.
So I think we've mentioned it a little bit before, but for me, it was taking the leap out of the police force and into something completely different. I was quite mentally ill, let's say. I had a lot of mental health issues working in the police force, a lot of struggles, but it's the type of job when you're in it, you just get swept up along the way, and people struggle so often to take that step out of it because it's kind of becomes all you know. You don't think you've got any transferable skills, and once you're in, the pay is quite attractive and does go up. So for me, it would be really just walking away from that and stepping into the world of tech. And within, I think it was about 4 years, I went from junior SDM to heading up the SOC for Orange Cyberdefense UK. So really, really proud of what I've achieved, proud of where I've come from. And as I say to everyone, it's never too late to change your career path. And I think if you've got that passion, if you've got that desire and that grit to really give your all in a job, it doesn't matter who you are, what gender you are, where you come from, how old you are, you will succeed. As long as you've got those characteristics and you put your mind to it, anyone, I think, can succeed.
That's a great message. Thanks, Zoe. Eugina, what about you? What would you say your biggest career achievement has been to date?
So I think the biggest career achievement that this girl from Russia, who grew up in a single mother household, who sometimes didn't have enough to eat, who had to walk, because she couldn't afford a bus fare, a girl that at one point in her life was a single mother herself, a girl that started in the industry as a receptionist, a girl that always believed that she deserved it just like everyone else, and she unlimited herself. And she also knew that she was just a girl from Russia, and the only way she can make this world a better place is by one person at a time, promoting just one person, bringing one person as a speaker with them. And she started that whole movement in the industry, where now industry organizations, they have quotas on pianos and in their publications. So my biggest career achievement that I didn't give up in 50 years later, since the time I was born in Russia, is I am making this world a better place, one person at a time.
Definitely. Thanks, Eugina. Pam, what about you? What would you say your biggest achievement has been, and what did it kind of teach you?
I think I've already mentioned mine, but I like to see other people achieve, and I think through mentoring, or if it just be, you know, coaching with my team, and I think by passing on that experience, by seeing other people succeed, I really enjoy seeing that, and I think success comes from success. So yeah, I think my biggest achievement today is seeing my team succeed by hitting the numbers. I think it's by seeing people get promotions, and I think my biggest achievement is just being part of that journey for them, and you know, whatever that brings for the future for me.
Thanks, Pam. And finally, Ellison Anne, what about you?
My biggest career achievement clearly would be Enveil, the company, and where we are, that we, you know, started with an idea and now it's a business. That's fantastic. And then as a sole founder, CEO, and oh, by the way, I'm also a highly technical mom of 5. I think that is a great story, and the platform now that I've been given, like I said, to be visible, to lead with substance, and to try to normalize this for other women, I'm incredibly grateful for, and I'm also proud of.
Thanks, Ellison Anne. Yeah, it's definitely clear that you can still achieve a lot, even if the industry still has a little way to go in terms of representation. So thank you all for sharing that. That was really really lovely to hear. So I think that wraps up our Q&A. Just before we conclude, Pam, Ellison Anne, Eugina, Zoe, any last points you'd like to add here?
I think for me, the one thing I would add is for anybody listening that feels that, you know, they need some guidance, or they need some help, or they're looking for somebody just to bounce ideas off, you know, reach out to as many people within your organization as possible, because, you know, there will be people there that are willing to help you, to give you advice, and to help propel you. I think back to the initial point I made early on is just be brave, ask the questions, and you know, there are people out there who want to help.
Yeah, for sure. We had a question about how LinkedIn is kind of impacting the women in technology movement and social media platforms like that a bit earlier. So I think that's obviously a really great tool that we have access to nowadays that might not have been around when various people were starting their careers years ago. So it's obviously really important to use kind of all the tools you have at your disposal, and people are always willing to help, like you mentioned. Also, thank you very much for joining, everybody. Thank you especially to our panelists. Obviously, women in tech and the women in tech movement is something we're really passionate about at Babel. Our senior team is predominantly made up of women, so it's something we're really kind of passionate about pushing and moving along, making sure our female spokespeople are being heard. So we're really happy to have had you on the call today, and really appreciate your time. And hopefully we can continue this discussion going forwards as well. So thank you very much, guys, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Holly.
You.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.